I think it's safe to say that when talking to adult gamers or even non-gaming adults, if you ask them to name one FPS franchise from their lifetime, Wolfenstein, along with Doom and Quake, will be some of the top names that come to mind. One could even go out on a limb and refer to the trio of franchises as the undisputed holy trinity of first-generation, first-person shooter games, serving to establish the industrial shift from 2D graphics to 3D graphics. Also, all three games in varying ways served the alternate but equally important purpose of furthering popular discussion on violence in gaming, a debate that had just begun to circulate nationwide only weeks before with the release of Mortal Kombat. Gaming culture at the time was embroiled in a rather difficult and awkward phase of its still fairly young lifespan. Gaming was still widely regarded as a kid's activity, with game consoles being perceived as for the use of children alone. The mere notion of adults enjoying gaming was shunned, with society viewing such individuals as either mentally deranged or possibly pedophilic in nature. Each of these games challenged the general non-gaming public in distinctly separate ways, forcing the public to face a reality that didn't necessarily align with their pre-existing beliefs. Quake arguably set the foundations for PvP first-person shooters, especially arena shooters, and was criticized for supposedly training underage kids and teens to shoot each other. Doom has for decades now been a punching bag for excessive gore and violence, and, like Dungeons & Dragons, was met with feverish religious outcry for supposedly promoting demonic and hellish themes, with some going so far as to claim the game corrupted children's souls. Personally, I find this claim to be particularly funny, as when you take note of the fact that the player spends the entirety of the game slaughtering demons and other such otherworldly abominations. So if anything, these churches were themselves promoting demons, as they seem to be opposed to players killing them. Oh well, hashtag demon lives matter, I guess. But Wolfenstein managed to not only touch upon the same controversies as Doom, it doubled down and embraced a potential onslaught of criticism and outcry by prominently featuring an even more controversial subject matter, the Nazis. You'd have to be a pretty bold game to not only make allusions to, but openly and brazenly feature the Nazis and the image of the swastika, with the game going so far as to have the player fight off Adolf Hitler in his gigantic robot suit and accompanying equally destructive guns. I mean, you gotta admit that's pretty ballsy, considering World War II had barely ended 50 years prior, and most of the veterans from the war were still alive and well. 9 years later, after several sequels and spin-offs, none of whom really managed to recapture the same degree of both acclaim and infamy as the initial, Swedish developer Machine Games, through its owner ZeniMax Media, acquired ID Software, the development team behind Wolfenstein and the rest of the Holy Trinity, and once they did so, set about working on a new installment in the Wolfenstein series. One goal the team had in mind, likely for both creative and commercial reasons, was that the new game effectively should act as a soft reboot for the franchise, keeping in many of the existing overarching plot and gameplay elements, while at the same time updating the core concepts in order to appeal to a new generation of players, and free up the development team to reinterpret the existing world from an entirely new perspective, without having to be inherently and entirely dependent on the restrictions of a traditional sequel to an otherwise long-standing franchise. So today, just like I would for any other game, we're going to critique this game based on its own merits and flaws. Part of me is kind of glad today that my channel isn't monetized at all anyway, because I can hardly imagine how the YouTube bots and staff are going to react to me talking about real Nazis, not imaginary ones. Now, I should probably answer the most obvious elephant in the room. Why am I reviewing Wolfenstein The New Order, a game that initially released back in 2014, when I could be reviewing more modern titles that some would argue are more relevant to the public eye? Well, over the holidays I did acquire several recent high-profile games that were on sale, two of them being Wolfenstein The New Order and Wolfenstein 2 The New Colossus. I had planned previously to spend my time critiquing Far Cry 5, but after only a few hours of play, I readily admit I found myself fairly bored and dismayed at the prospect of proceeding farther into the game, in order to complete a review of the game. So instead, I decided to load up Wolfenstein and spend a few hours brutally massacring Nazis before happily going off to sleep. My experience with the game was, to say, an interesting one. To be fair, one should probably come to a small ocean of bugs, crashes, and technical incompetence with any Bethesda-produced game, as Wolfenstein The New Order was merely published by Bethesda and not directly developed by them. Wolfenstein manages to mostly dodge the curse, at least for the most part. But how well does the team deliver in regards to the other principal areas of development? In this alternate historical take on World War II, Wolfenstein The New Order kicks things off on July 16, 1946. The Allies are losing the war, but hope yet remains. The Nazi Science Division has prospered, and they've managed to develop incredible and terrifying mechanical beasts. In very little time, they've managed to not only rally, but cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war. I'm sorry, I've never been much of a Shakespearean admiree, so to speak, but Julius Caesar did occasionally wax eloquence. In a desperate move to cut off one of the heads in the symbolic Nazi Hydra, the player assuming the role of William B.J. Blazkowicz, accompanied by supporting characters Fergus, Reed, and Private Watts, in addition to a large deployment of fellow Allied soldiers. The group lays siege to a Nazi weapons factory run by the ultimate antagonist, General Wilhelm Strauss.
So long since I practiced my English. It's a dying tongue. You? I've seen you before. Oh, I like you. Such a resilient specimen. With you, I could do great things. Oh, I like the eyes on this one. Not this one. Somebody broke it already. It's a shame. Captain Blazkowicz, help me make a choice. In your opinion, which one of these two varieties would best support my research? I have the adequate room for samples. Should you decline my appeal, I shall have to put a scalpel to both of them and we'll be here all day. I will make matters simple. All you need to do is look to the one. Go on, Captain, make a choice. Really, this one. I would have elected the other, but I will defer to your preference, Captain Blazkowicz.
General Death's head. Today he's teaching me a lesson. I've seen suffering and death. People maimed and tortured. Thought I'd seen it all. But I'd never seen true cruelty. Until now.
Who's easily one of the most overtly and over-the-top mad scientist stereotypes since William Dafoe's Green Goblin back in the original Spider-Man film in 2002, or frankly any of the mad scientist villains in the Spider-Man films now that I come to think about it. Also, can we just confess how similar this scene is in tone to The Evil Within 2?
What is this place? There's ashes down here. There's a lot of ashes down here.
Hey, Wyatt, see if you can find a way to open that door. Move it. What did you just fucking do?
I'm sorry, I thought it was for the door.
Trigger the goddamn incinerator. Turn it off, turn those dials. Shit! Let's try this one.
I'm so sorry.
It's a keyhole. Blazkowicz, find the key!
I'm not accusing the evil within of stealing from Wolfenstein, but from merely a visual and narrative presentation perspective. In other words, how the scene is laid out for the player and how the player interacts with the room and objects in it. It does feel very evil within-ish. The game takes a permanent and player-driven narrative turn when the player is forced to save one of his companions and doom the other to a horrible and untimely demise. The typical run-of-the-mill hero's curse.
Spider-Man! This is why only fools are heroes. Because you never know when some lunatic will come along with the sadistic choice. Let die the woman you love? Or suffer the little children? Make your choice, Spider-Man, and see how a hero is rewarded.
Don't do it, Goblin!
We are who we choose to be. Now choose!
Okay, I'm done referencing Green Goblin memes. Blazkowicz and the rest of the survivors break out of the laboratory. In the process, barely avoid being deep fried by the incinerators. However, during the explosion that follows, Blazkowicz receives a shrapnel wound to the side of the head and loses consciousness before hitting the water. He initially regains consciousness in a psychiatric facility in Poland. However, a long period of time passes as he struggles to recover from his injury and also recover his identity and memories, which were lost as a result of the after effects of his aforementioned injury.
Strange sensation. Trapped in my body. I black out. I'm losing time. Sometimes the seasons change in the blink of an eye. I'm having trouble with my thoughts. They dissipate like a scent on the wind. But it's getting better. Here's what I know. I'm in Poland. A hospital. No, an insane asylum. She's the head nurse. That's her father. Shrink. And her mother. Some type of pharmacist. They run the place, I reckon. Sometimes Christmas. Sometimes birthdays. And sometimes Nazis come. And they leave with patients in shackles. Like it's Death's Head's personal candy store. And the shrink raises hell and all, but in the end he signs. No choice, I suppose. And I've seen all this. Good folks made powerless. I'm alive because of these people. I'm getting better. Because of her. Her name is Anya. She takes good care of me. She takes care of everyone. She holds this place together. She's supposed to be married by now, but hasn't happened.
During this time, he is nursed back to health by the asylum's head nurse, Anya Olawa, and her parents, who maintain and operate the facility, under the obviously less than benevolent gaze of the Nazi regime, who regularly drop in to drag away the asylum's patients to use as test subjects in their continued human experimentation practices, holding the family at gunpoint, urging them to sign falsified papers, granting permission for the forced transfer of patients under the guise of it being a voluntary transfer. I find this period of history particularly fascinating, as while everyone knows a lot of the Nazis' history of hatred towards the Jewish community, not a lot of people are aware of the fact that, that was only one of many different communities Nazis held in contempt and considered less than human. At any rate, Blazkowicz finds himself, along with the other patients and staff, in the line of fire, his memory spontaneously returning at the perfect opportunity, very convenient for the plot, when Anya's parents are murdered in front of her eyes by the Nazis for standing by their principles and refusing to sign the paperwork relinquishing their control over the facility, which was to be handed over in its entirety for the sole use and benefit of the Nazi regime.
Nazi scum.
After a long chase sequence, Blazkowicz rescues Anya from the clutches of the Nazis who killed her family, and the two of them take shelter temporarily at her grandparents' house. In a surprise twist, Blazkowicz finds a accidental stowaway and has a little chat with him. Yeah, it doesn't go well for the guy. Anya's grandparents explain that while Blazkowicz was in the asylum, 20 years had passed. The Nazis won the war, conquered the world, and were actively consolidating their power. There was no real active resistance, not anymore. Any active resistance had been effectively crushed. However, the family, still vengeful over the loss of Anya's parents, not only agrees to shelter Blazkowicz, but also to go with him to extract vengeance on the local Nazi population. There's something oddly satisfying about having an elderly grandfather act as your getaway driver, while also screaming morale boosters as you massacre your enemies.
They rode
Not safe. You kill the Nazis. Here, I stay with Karl. If somebody... We wait for you here. Kill everyone.
While the equally elderly grandmother blows away nearby hostiles with a close-range shotgun. After slaughtering, a base or two of Nazi troops, and encountering enough very big Nazi robots, the grandparents and Anya manage to set aside enough money to pay for 2 seemingly first-class tickets on a high-speed train to Berlin. And here we get easily the most intimidating villain in the whole game.
Sie können den Kaffee auf dem Tisch abstellen. Augenblick mal. Lassen Sie sich mal ansehen. Ja. Sehr schöne arische Züge. Findest du nicht auch, Bobi?
Ja, mir gefallen seine Augen.
Bitte, setz... Entschuldigen Sie mein Benehmen. Ich bin Obersturmbannführer Engel. Und das ist mein liebreizender Begleiter. Das bist du doch, Bobi.
Was soll das, mein Schatz?
Ich möchte Sie einem Test unterziehen. Damit lassen sich Spuren unreinen Blutes, die in den Adern einer Person fließen, feststellen. Ich bin mir sicher, dass Sie diesen Test mit Leichtigkeit bestehen werden. Und wenn nicht, dann werde ich Sie erschießen. Haben Sie das verstanden? Das ist nur ein Test! Aber antworten Sie ehrlich. Wenn Sie nach der Waffe greifen sollten, sind Sie tot. Noch bevor Sie Ihre Entscheidung bereuen werden. Gut. Lasst uns anfangen! Wählen Sie das Foto, das Sie erregt. Wenn Sie wissen, was ich meine. Ach so. Und jetzt wählen Sie das Foto, das in Ihnen Glücksgefühle auslöst. Interessant. Meinen Sie, dass dieser Mann unreines Blut hat, Bernhard?
Ich weiß nicht, Frau Obersturmbannführer.
Ja, das werden wir bald wissen, nicht wahr? Diesmal wählen Sie das Bild, das Sie am meisten mit Abscheu erfüllt. Ich hätte sagen sollen, dass das Ihre letzte Wahl ist. Also wählen Sie weise. Ich sage Ihnen etwas. Wenn Sie ein Nicht-Arier gewesen wären, hätten Sie zur Waffe gegriffen.
Sie müssen diese Dame schon entschuldigen, aber sie ist sehr stolz darauf, diese Bilderrätsel mit wildfremden Männern zu spielen.
Diese Bilder. Urlaubsfotos, alte Kriegsaufnahmen. Gar nichts. Davon abgesehen kann ich ein Nicht-Arier mit bloßem Auge erkennen. Du etwa nicht? Lassen Sie ihn gehen, Bernhard.
Ich nehme mal an, eine bildhübsche Frau wird in seinem Abteil warten auf ihn.
Ach, Bobi, lass gut sein. Vergessen Sie den Kaffee für Ihre Freundin.
And sadly, we never get to see this woman again in the whole game, which is a missed opportunity by far, as she was way more terrifying than our dear friend Wilhelm could ever hope to be. She also kind of reminds me of the antagonist from the third Far Cry game, Vass, or whatever his name was. The combination of great writing, great motion capture, the great voice acting, everything really makes you feel unnerved, as in both cases the characters can be charming and completely disarming, while at the same time never fully losing that very real and very deadly edge, as if they're always calculating whether or not to kill you or dismiss you. At any rate, after this incredibly tense moment, we transition into what is probably one of the most awkward narrative transitions we've seen in recent memory.
Are you comfortable sharing?
Sometimes Christmas. Sometimes birthdays. Sometimes mayhem, suffering, and death. Sometimes you just need to feel something good.
After this thankfully short cutscene, I assume because their business didn't last very long, and by the way, part of me, the cynic in me, only thinks the reason we got this cutscene was just to arrange the canonical conception of the future twin protagonist for future use in the series. For those not aware, the developers for their next spin-off Wolfenstein game are basically creating a fanfiction story where the twins of these two are the protagonists of a new co-op Wolfenstein game set roughly 20 years after the events of this game. So if you think about it, you are now seeing the conception of the very two heroes you will soon be playing on PC. If that doesn't weird you out, then I don't know what to say, because this kind of weirds me out. While the story does continue on from here, it's at this point that the game somewhat loosens its hold on the player and allows for a bit more open-endedness in gameplay, with prior levels feeling more like tutorials to a more or lesser extent. On that note, let's talk gameplay. Wolfenstein, like its cousin Doom, attempts to revitalize the classic 90s run-and-gun style of gameplay, with retro-styled health and ammo pickups, level-specific weapon pickups, etc. The difference between the two is that while in Doom 2016 you can run around wildly with little regard for your own safety and bathe in the blood of your enemies, getting up close and personal for gory, fantastical kills that'll make any Mortal Kombat fan giddy with excitement, Wolfenstein takes an entirely different approach. Despite my frequent attempts at run-and-gun shooting, many of the levels were simply not designed with this in mind, while Doom specifically built in many strictly linear, narrow corridors in addition to more open areas to allow for regular gameplay flow shifts between bloody, close-quarters combat as well as medium to long-range and aerial opportunities to limit the likelihood of players getting gradually building up a sense of boredom with one or the other. Wolfenstein rarely grants you the same satisfaction as its legacy predecessors in engaging with enemies in confined quarters. More often than not, you'll find yourself hiding behind cover as waves of enemies spam bullets and occasionally grenades until you kill them all in turn. To the game's credit, each weapon does feel very fun to use with a lot of clear attention to detail in everything from the weapon models, reload animations, firing and reloading sound effects, etc. In particular, I greatly enjoyed using the Lasercraft work, the 1960 handgun, the AR marksman, and the double-barreled shotgun, and of course the knives. But I just couldn't shake the feeling that while playing, that the New Order would have benefited from further suspending the player's disbelief a bit more, and allow for even more aggressive gameplay tactics, in lieu of its existing strict duck and cover style. When I take into consideration the unique, alternate take on US history, combined with the very distinct steampunk enemy and weapon designs, and the gigantic, semi-open-ended and very intricately detailed world, rich with lore and other forms of atmospheric storytelling, it does strongly remind me of my time spent in Rapture and in Columbia. The frequent boss battles against giant Nazi-built robots, which upon taking damage do drop armor for the player, do offer a bit of a fun challenge and encourage adapting a more aggressive playstyle, as opposed to just a normal, spread-out wave of enemies. Charging one of these armored monstrosities with a massive minigun in my hands, pouring energy blast into its metallic hide, is a very satisfactory experience. Except I'll give Bioshock Infinite a bit more credit for allowing the player more agency over how they traverse the world and how they execute upon their quests. Overall, Wolfenstein The New Order manages to find a delicate balance between remaining respectful of the historical nature of the source material, while also extrapolating from the ideology overriding and possessing the German people, in order to fasten a glimpse at what very nearly could have been. Whether you are a stealth fan, a run-and-gun enthusiast, or just an alternate history buff, The New Order will provide you many opportunities to explore your niche, but in none of those cases will you always feel like the game fully embraces that particular playstyle. In my opinion, it's a good game for everyone, but a great game for no one. On that note, I think that's where we're going to wrap it up for the day. For those of you interested in buying Wolfenstein The New Order, or other digital Steam games, I would recommend doing so on the Humble Store. I've used the Humble Store and have often bought its regularly changing promoted game bundles for several years now, and I'm happy to feature them as a sponsor of this channel. As a charity-driven site, Humble Bundle has helped advocate and raise money for hundreds if not thousands of charities, to this date selling over 47 million bundles. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so by going to the Humble Store via this affiliate link, also available in the description down below, and purchasing any game or games on the site from there. It's a win-win, you get a game, and I get a couple nickels and dimes that'll save me a bit of money here or there. Also, if you want to interact with me directly, I'm on Twitter at WarriorDanYT. I regularly post on there, and it's usually the fastest means to reach me directly. Whenever there is a video delay or some kind of announcement, I always do it there. Thank you to those of you who have joined me by watching this video. Be sure to shoot me a comment down in the comment section down below. I always love hearing your feedback. I'll see you all again in a week or two with a new What is the Point of review. But for now, this is WarriorDan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody, and peace out.